Welcome to this chapter on manufacturer specifications for the jack code jf017e CVT transmission. In this chapter we will cover the mechanical specifications, clearances, adjustments of this unit. My name is Jared Warren and I'll be your host for this chapter. It's a great day to fix transmission, so let's get started. Alright, so most of this information on torque settings or specifications is from the TSB. You can find that in Mitchell and All Data. It's the Judder code TSB. It's like a 170 page TSB or something like that. It basically shows you how to disassemble part of the transmission and reassemble the transmission, the pulleys, that kind of stuff. That's where a majority of these torque settings came from. There are some here that were not published or are not part of any TSB or manuals that we came up with on ourselves just by the bolt size. So kind of use your best judgment. If you think something might not quite be right, use your best judgment. But I'm sure these torque settings are going to work just fine. They have been working just fine for me. jf017e has type 1 and type 2. The drive ratios are a little bit different, as you see here in the chart. Negative 0.384 for type 1, negative 384 for type 2, so there's very little difference there. But look at the final drive ratio. Final drive ratios have a big difference here. Reverse ratios are about the same, or are the same. Final drive 4.677 to 1. And type 2 is 5.577. So there's a huge difference there. Make sure you check your diff, ring and pinion tooth counts, and your transfer gear tooth counts. Make sure those are all the same when you're interchanging this stuff. Especially if you're exchanging a unit, make sure you have the correct ratio also. When building the unit, one thing we need to do is check the end play on this. End play, there's two different types of bearings. There's a cage bearing that's shown here in the drum. This is a one-piece cage bearing. And then the other type 2 is a bearing that would fit right around here, a larger bearing, and it's a two-piece bearing that sits on the drum itself. And so that's what the difference between type 1 and type 2 is. Go ahead and stack everything up and use your H gauge. Go ahead and set the H gauge down where the stator or the support sits on both sides. Adjust your rod down to the tip of the bearing right here, so there's bearing 0. Flip your H gauge over and measure the distance or the gap in between here and where the bearing will drive. You should have about 30 to 40 thousandths. Now if you need to make adjustments, here's part numbers for the different bearings. Use the prefix or the beginning of the part number, so 31407 dash, then whatever thickness you need. So if you need a 4.1 thick bearing, you'd order the first part 31407 dash 1XZ0E. That'd be for a 4.1 millimeter bearing. Now on type 2, same thing. Here's the part number here, 31435 dash, and whatever the last size is, and that's the last bit of numbers in the part number. Alright, clutch clearances. They don't give you any clutch clearances from the factory or manufacturer. So what I've done is basically over the months and that I've been working on these, I have checked different clutch clearances on good clutches that came in, on good cores, made notes on what I put back in, and what we came up with was 20 thousandths, 30 thousandths in the forward clutch. Reverse brake is a little bit looser, 45 to 55 thousandths. So there's a good set of clutch clearances. Fluid type is the NS3 Nissan CVT fluid. This here tool is for pumping fluid in from the bottom to help fill the transmission just from the bottom. And then here's your dipstick stool, 2 tools in one. We showed you how to make the tool in the service chapter. Dry this unit takes 9.25 quarts. Typical trans service is about 3.2 quarts. So Nissan has another TSB out for this transmission, and it is servicing the trans, and the number is NTB18055B. And that was issued March 20th, 2019. There was a couple of them before that too. The reason I put the date and the number here is this is what I know this chart is correct for until that date. So if it says December of 2019 on the TSB, you know the TSB has been updated. Make sure you don't use this chart and you use the one with the newest TSB. So explain this 2-piece handle, 2-piece stick. This here would be the red dipstick, and this here would be the blue dipstick. So when you put the dipstick in, it's touching whatever color is. The blue is the short one, the red one is the long one. So take your year, make, and model. Let's just go with a Murano, 2016 Murano right here. You're going to see the fill level is 14 to 22 millimeters, and it's going to be the red handle. So we're going to take this blue part right here, we'd pull this blue out and flip it off, and just have the red section. Stick the dipstick in there, check the fluid level. It needs to be 170 to 180 degrees, and you want it between 14 and 22 millimeters on the hash mark. And then you should be done. Fill it up until it's in the hash mark. Make sure you do the temperature correctly. Look on your scan tool to see what the temperature is. Be warned, snap-on, some of the temps are wrong in the snap-ons. You may have to use a temp gun on that one. Transmission pressures and cooler flow. So we have cooler flow out of these 2 lines here. We don't have any numbers for cooler flow on this yet, but we're working on to get some of this more information up on the CVTs. Here's a line pressure tap, your forward clutch pressure tap, your brake clutch pressure tap, primary pulley and TCC release. Up here you have your secondary pressure. So go ahead and put your pressure gauge on line pressure, and make sure you have a good gauge that's going to hold at least 1,000 psi, if not more, for safety. Me personally, I use a transducer, a lot more accurate, and draws you a picture also. So park neutral, you have about 72 pound psi in idle, and then in reverse and drive you have 72.5 to 200.1 psi at an idle. There's a big range here for pressures. Then on install speed, install the converter up, 607.5 to 680 psi in the line pressure port. Boy, that's some pressure. If you don't have the correct gauge on there and the correct hose, that thing's just going to shoot straight forward and just blow a hole right through the side of the hose and just make a real mess. So make sure you use the correct and the adequate equipment for pressure testing.